Hello, my name is Ashley, this is Faithful Rattos, and welcome or welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about the plans and the actual pairings for my first ever rat litters. Now, I'm a new breeder and I've been working really hard for this over the past couple of years, and it's something that I'm really super excited about, and I can't wait to share that journey. I do want to make a disclaimer here though, that this has been a lot of work and time and effort, finding the right rats and putting all the research and planning into it. This is not something I've taken on lightly. This is not something I'm doing just because I think my rats are cute. This is not me trying to just make rats. This is me trying to make good quality rats for the future, and also make sure that the genes that I'm working with carry on into the future. I feel really strongly about backyard breeding, and that if you want to be a good breeder, that you need to be planning and preparing and considering lots of different factors. And I've gone into those a lot in different videos on my channel, so I'm not going to really focus on that here. But I did want to make a disclaimer that this is not me just putting my rats together because I think they're cute. This is not me saying that I recommend you breed your rats. Absolutely not. If you have rats from good breeders that have a good background, that have good type, temperament, and health, and you have the permission for the breeders involved, then yes, maybe you could go for it. However, it's not something you should go into lightly, and it's not something I've gone into lightly. Before we get into the video at large, I would like to say that if you want to stick around and see my journey as it unfolds, do subscribe and stick around here. You can also become a channel member for as little as £199 a month. I have different levels at different price points, but I would really love to see channel members join the family. Okie dokie, let's get into the video. So, as I've mentioned, a lot of planning and preparation and research has gone into getting to this point, making sure that I had appropriate foundations, making sure I was prepared financially and like physically with resources and stuff. This is not something that I've gone into lightly, and I have made a video about my overall breeding plans, and I've also made a video about my preparation and that sort of thing if you're interested in that, but I'm not really going to go over that in this video. So, my initial plans, the rats that I initially wanted to pair, did not go to plan. Something happened with my book and it made him not a reasonable book to choose. And so I had to go with a different plan. I had to pivot my plans. And here we are now with the rats that I'm about to pair. The does that I brought home from Alpha Centauri for my foundations, I brought 3 home at the time. And it was really because there was 3 rats, females, in that litter that I brought all 3 of them. But as sort of they've grown up and I've got to know them, Serafina, one of them, one of my Siameses, I decided that I wasn't going to breed from her because I just didn't think her temperament was quite right. Now, don't get me wrong, she's a really sweet rat and she's lovely and I love her to pieces. She is just a little flighty for my liking, and I don't think that really is conducive to being a good mother with the extra stresses that go on with, litters and hormones and all. So I chose not to breed from her because I don't think it would be in her best interests. Now, her 2 sisters, on the other hand, are absolutely perfect and wonderful in all the different ways, and so I am choosing to go ahead and breed them. Now, I do want to make a little note here that a lot of rat breeders will either choose to do multiple litters at once or will coincide their breeding with other breeders, and this is to make sure that we have the chance to foster over kittens if necessary, because it's not like animals like dogs and cats where it's not easy, but easier to feed them if they need extra support. With rats, it's really difficult, and hand rearing often does not go very well. So it's really important that you have the mothers there to look after them, because we don't really have the proper tools, I guess, to support them well in the way that other species do. And this pairing multiple litters at a time is not ethical for all species, but for rats it is for those reasons. And the books are a little bit younger. I got them from Novigrad Rattery recently. You've seen the video on my channel, and I'm really excited about those boys. They're really lovely and sweet, and I'm really excited about their temperament. And they also carry with them the fact that they come from the same family as my heart rat Cheeky, who is incredibly special to me, and she's gone now. She's been gone about a month, and it still really hurts. She was still one of my favorite rats ever, and so knowing that her nephews are continuing the line is really special. So yeah, let's get, oh, now I'm crying. I will say I'm filming this after I've had a litter, so just like thinking through the fact that Cheeky's kind of legacy is here is a bit emotional for me. Anyway, Didn't expect to cry in this video. So the first pairing that I'm going to tell you about is Marissa and Beatty. So Marissa is a golden Siamese and Beatty is a Russian Burmese Dumbo. In this litter I'm expecting Wheaten and Russian Wheaten. This is because Marissa's mum was a Russian Wheaten, and so I know that she carries Russian. Because Russian is a recessive gene, which means that to be Russian you need to have 2 copies. So I know that she has 1 from her mum, and because obviously Beatty is a Russian, that means the babies have 50-50 chance of being Russian themselves. I will say I have a whole series of videos about rat genetics that if anything I say in this video confuses you, do go and check out those videos. They'll be really helpful for you. I have videos on a lot of the different dilutes, including the Russian blue gene. I have lots of videos on the sea locust, which are the varieties I'm going to be talking about in this video because that's the varieties I'm breeding, and just other rat genetic stuff in general if you're interested, and if anything I say in here confuses you or you aren't sure about what I'm saying. There is also a chance for Siamese in this litter, and I'm not super hopeful about it because I have a sneaky suspicion that Beatty is actually a sable. Now there's a chance that he isn't and that he's just a dark Russian Burmese, but I do think that he's a sable. Now, a sable is a rat with 2 copies of the Burmese gene, which makes a darker colour. So there is chance for Siamese, but I'm not 100% certain for that. And also a possible Dumbos, and that is because Beatty himself is a Dumbo, as again, it is a recessive gene. And I know that the girls have a sibling. I can't remember if it was a brother or a sister. They do have a sibling that was a Dumbo, which means that there is a chance they carry Dumbo. And because Beatty is a Dumbo and also Burdock, if they do carry Dumbo, there is a chance for Dumbo in the litter. So that's the first pairing. And then we've got Sophonax and Burdock. Sophonax is a Wheaten and Burdock is a Burmese Rex Dumbo. So in this litter, I'm expecting Wheaten at about 50%, Sable Wheaten at about 25%, and Siamese at about 25% of the litter. Because he's Rex, I'm also expecting Rex in the litter, probably about 50%, and possible Dumbo again because Sophie and Marissa are sisters and they do have a sibling that was Dumbo, which means there's a high likelihood they carry Dumbo. Both Sophie and Burdock are quite licky, so I'm interested to see if that translates, but I am really excited to see the temperament of these rats as well as the looks of these rats because all of the rats involved are really sweet. But it is really interesting because I am doing an outcross here. I'm connecting 2 different lines together with this pairing, and I know these 2 lines have been joined together very nicely in the past with some other people that are working with these genes in the UK. So I know it works out well, but it will be interesting to see what traits they get from both different lines. So it is slightly younger than what I would prefer to pair my books. As I mentioned, I had to pivot to use these books away from my original plans, and this does mean that I've had to compromise on the ages. I would have, in an ideal world, like to wait a little bit longer to pair these books just to make sure that their temperament is very good and that they don't go through a hormonal phase during that 6 to 12 month period. But because of the age of my does, I've had to go a bit earlier than that, at about 5 months old. My girls are 9 months old now, which is on the older end for a doe to have a litter. And I'm not worried about them at this age, but I did know and had in the back of my mind that if these litters weren't to work out first time around, that I was going to be pushing it very close for the healthy prime age to have a litter if I didn't start now. And so that's the compromise I had to make. It's not ideal, but it's just what I had to do. Timing wise, as I mentioned, I waited until the boys were 5 months old. And I also had to wait to make sure that when I paired, the rats would give birth after I came back. As you saw from my last video, I took a trip to the US, to New York and New Jersey to see family, and I also saw one of my online rat friends, which is really cool. But because of that trip, I needed to make sure that they weren't going to birth or be very close to imminently birthing when I was away. So that meant that I had to wait until the end of July because of when my trip was. Rat pregnancy, if you don't already know, is 22 to 23 days, and so I had to account for that with the timings, and that's what I did, and thankfully everything happened after I came back. Does come into heat about every 4-ish days and is usually on average lasting about 12 hours. They have their estrus cycle quite regularly, and some does are really easy to tell when they are in heat. My does are like this, thankfully. So they do 2 different behaviors that you're going to see in the mating videos. One is they wiggle their ears, and the other is called lordosis, and this is the position they have to get in to be mated, and it's where they have an arched back. And some does will react to touch when they're in heat with this. One of my does, Seraphina, was in heat last night, and every time one of her friends I went past her, she would get excited. So that's how you know your does are in heat. You can also check by seeing if their vaginal opening is open, because when they're in heat, it does sort of, it opens more than it does just on the average day. But not all does are very apparent when they come into heat, and so sometimes you do have to just see what happens when you put them together. Most does will reject a book if they're not in heat, so this is a good way to tell. But also some does just don't fancy certain books, just like people, and so it just won't work out. There's actually a very interesting case of this. The Samu Rats has a whole series on breeding, and she goes from pairing all the way to the rats being 8 weeks old and going home. And she has a very interesting video about when she was pairing her rat Mog, she was called, and Mog was put with a book named Todd, I think, I don't know, but she was put with a book repeatedly, and she kept not liking. And then they tried a different book, and she liked him. Interestingly enough, the book that she was rejecting actually came out with an abscess a couple of days later. So I think there are also, you've got to take into consideration the dose preference, because one, it's not fair to her to be so stressed out by a book that she doesn't want, but two, also they can tell things about the books that we sometimes can't, and they are very good at making their own like matches. So the method that I chose to use for my rats, there are many different ways that people do go about mating their rats. The one I chose to use is called the one night stand method, and this is because the rats are together maybe overnight, maybe about 12 hours or so. And I choose this method because it makes it as easy as possible on the books going back into their group. Sometimes if a book has been out with a doe for a long extended period of time, they do find it harder to go back into their book group, and I didn't want to have any issues with that, because I didn't want to have to neuter rats unnecessarily or split up groups and stuff like that, because I don't actually have that many books at the moment, and 3 of them are actually old, so I didn't want to have any issues with getting my books back integrated with their group, so I chose the one night stand method. Initially, I was using a cage called an Alaska, which is pretty big for my birthing cage, and I did this to give the does choice, so they could go away from the book if they wanted to and have a break, or, you know, they could really choose what they wanted in that setup. It did turn out to be not the right fit for my does, and I think that is really important, that there is no one size fits all way to keep animals or to breed animals, and I wanted to give them the choice, but they chose that it wasn't the right thing for them. On the 31st of July, both of the girls were not in heat, so I started with Sophie and Burdock in the Alaska, and she was super, super nasty to him. She was not in heat, but from the video that I'm going to show you, you can see that she was really, really nasty, and she was sidestepping him and kicking him, and it turned into a rat ball. So that was a no-go. We waited a long time for Beatty to wake up and come out of the burrows in the bioactive soil to try Marissa and him together, and this also didn't work out. She wasn't happy, and she did some kicking. I don't think she was as aggressive with him as Sophie was, but she definitely wasn't happy, and so I separated them. Then the next day, on the 1st of August, Sophie again wasn't in heat. We tried her. It was a no-go. It was a no-go. On the second day, Marissa was in heat. When we initially tried in the afternoon, she was still kicking him, even in a smaller space in the show tank. It's a little bit like the Kaya method intros, that the smaller space helps them to be a bit calmer with each other and to be safer. So we tried again a few hours later, because I could tell that she was coming into heat. She wasn't just fully there yet, though. So when we tried again a few hours later, she was happy with him in the show tank, and when we moved them up to a small hamster cage where they did end up spending the night together, she was very, very, very interested, and she was showing him that she was interested, but because of the night before and the afternoon, she wasn't interested in it, and she was kicking him and pushing him away. He was quite nervous of her, and then also when she was very, very, very much in heat, every time he went near her, she would squeak. And because of his experience, he would like back up when she would squeak. But that was because she was excited and she wanted him there. So he got a bit of mixed messages there initially, and it did take them a while to sort of settle and get into the hang of it. We did put them in a different room in the dark, and I peeked my head in and I saw that they were getting busy together, and so I left them overnight, and they were quite happy overnight. I think in the morning when I woke up, they were sleeping together. In the morning, I put them back in with their cage mates, and all was good. We tried again the next night for Sophie, and again and again, and she just wasn't coming into heat. And after about 2 or 3 times of putting her with Burdock, I decided I was just going to check her myself, because she's usually quite obvious in heat, and I can tell that without having to involve Burdock in the situation and stress both of them out with that. It was really frustrating because day after day after day she just was not in heat, which is very interesting because a week went by and she had no heat cycle, which is very unusual for her. One, she's quite regular, and two, she is also very obvious. So I wasn't catching her in heat, and I was very, very frustrated at this point. And as the days go by, I'm thinking these litters are getting further and further apart, so if I do need to foster or anything like that, it's going to become much more difficult because they aren't going to birth at a similar time. On the 8th of August at 3 a.m, I woke up to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom and I went, I'm just going to check Sophie and see if she's in heat. Because about 3 a.m, my rats are usually awake. So I went in and I checked Sophie and she was in heat. So I don't know if she missed a cycle or she'd been doing her heats at night so I couldn't see them. I'm not really sure, but she was in heat. So I grabbed Burdock, who was also awake. I put them in the small hamster cage together, and you know what? And straight away, they knew what they wanted to do and they got on with it. I left them together from about 3 a.m. until lunchtime that day, and then I put them back in their respective cages and all was good. So that was at the beginning of August, the 1st of August for Marissa and the 8th of August for Sophonax. So that meant that Marissa was day 21, so this is when you start to watch for birth, on the 22nd. And that Sophie was day 21 on the 29th. So this meant that my trip, when I got back on the 20th, that was perfect timing for them to have their pregnancy and then me be back, be able to sort things out, and them have a litter. And what do you know? Thanks for watching. Bye!